worries, no worries. All right. So we're being recorded. Anything I say can and will be used, we'll say. All right. Well, let's do the sharing of the screen thing first. And there we go. All right. Supposedly everybody should be able to see a very bright white screen right now. Okay. Um, so something we've done at least for a couple of years now has just been kind of have like a general update on substance utilization, things like that along the way there. So um, in virtual, it's tricky along the way with conversations and all that, but by all means, feel free to jump in. And like our folks said, certainly towards the end can have lots of chat and all of that. So hope everyone's summer is going well. And it's beautiful day out there. Had a little bit of a foggy start, I guess, but I made the mistake this morning of not utilizing a substance for our soon to be 7-year-old, known as sunblock. And he was at baseball camp all day, and that's a substance he should have been using. So, folks, you should apply your sunscreen every hour. And don't be that dad. Ay, ay, ay. All right. So, just say sunscreen. Just say no. 2023. We go over lots of substances, trends, really big picture. Um, a little bit less this time on the individual pharmacology of substances, things like that. Trying to kind of gauge the audience. This crew, you guys know your stuff. So I know a good number of folks actually were in Morgantown recently for, oh, what was the name of the conference? It's like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, something like that. I don't know.
ATI.
Yeah, there we go. ATI. Thank you. Just someone. Really good. If you weren't at that conference, highly recommend it. Not tied to it. I was in the crowd, and it's kind of nice to sit in a chair for once and just listen. But certainly consider that one. AppDAC is coming up, I believe, in September, if anybody calls it that. The Appalachian Addiction, so on and so forth conference as well. So there's those two things. So bigger picture, substance use disorder, substance use in general, so on and so forth. So let's get hopping here. We're going to learn about drugs. We're going to actually just say no. Okay. I'm adding my own fourth learning objective. This is not in any of the paperwork. It's me taking advantage of being in charge of the slides, I guess. So why does it keep spelling it wrong? Well, turns out I suck at spelling. So I'm probably not alone, but I'm sure everybody remembers from back in the 80s. I believe it was 88 officially. The idea of the Just Say No campaign from that administration at the time. There's different studies, reports, articles on, hey, did that work? Did it not? And can you really study it for a short period of time? And so on and so forth. There's just a lot of, the dynamic and polarized conversations of 2023 are not necessarily new. It's just reinvigorating these days. But that was the Just Say No NO campaign. A good number of you probably already know about my little spelling bee adventure, but in case we got some new crowds here. Back in 7th grade, I was in a spelling bee and I got booted out, unlike these ladies and gents on that stage, because they asked me to spell relief and I spelled Rolaids and whatever. The really concerning part of that situation was that no one laughed, including the teachers. I was like, my friends, my peers, if they're not paying attention, that's expected. But it's like, come on, people. Like, that's also not when I knew I was going to be a pharmacist. Boy, that would be a good story, right? But nah, just a smart aleck, I guess. But the spelling thing is important. So the title of today's thing was Just Say No. Did we spell it right back in the 80s or at any point? Just say cano if you not down with English, I guess. Really important in the big picture. That's part of what we'll be going over here today, is not this wonderful GIF driving you nuts right now, but just knowing about things. One of the trends to go over when talking about trends is that some things really just don't change other than substances themselves. Here's a quote from an important guy at the time, well over 100 years ago now, that said, hey, us here in America, we consume the most habit-forming, we said drugs, substances in the globe. And here we are. There is obviously a lot of substance utilization across the globe. We are not alone. And in fact, certain substances here and there are used much more across the globe in any direction. But it when going over trends, that's one of our like charges here of for going over the updates for the year or a couple months. Some things don't change along the way. Other things sadly do. So here's the most updated I can get, apparently as of a month ago, now that I'm looking at it. But the numbers, this is not new to anyone here. As far as drug overdose deaths in our country, the way that I usually look at it, though, is with the heart at the top right. The overall idea that an American dies every 6 minutes of a drug overdose in our country, statistically speaking. Other side of the coin, a baby is born dependent to opioids, specifically every half hour. I haven't seen necessarily specific updates to that in the last year or two, so kind of going on a limb with the 30-minute thing. But a lot of times, a lot of educational things have a lot of numbers and epidemiology, and that's very important. But that seems to resonate with folks with the heart or the heartbeats along the way. All right, so how are we doing recently here? So here's data. The best we can pretty much get these days is the beginning of this year, which, I mean, if you look at that, that's pretty good, actually. I mean, it used to be like a year and a half when things went from provisional to concrete, I guess. But here's the change. So this little color coding is percent change. It's not the actuality. But blue is good, brown, orange, whatever we want to call them, is not as good. We, Appalachia here, West Virginia, are finally in a blue. There was an improvement. If you were to look at this in a different way, with a change, say a dot graph, line graph, you might be wondering, hey, are we in a blip? Are we, what's the future hold? Well, if you knew that, you'd buy only one Mega Millions lottery ticket, because, I mean, what would you need a second one for? So who knows? But lots of efforts of the folks here in this virtual room contributing to that blue along the way. So really big picture in this just say no atmosphere. Everything that we typically talk about when we say drugs accounts for, I believe we're actually close to 110,000 American deaths a year now. That's where that every 6 minutes comes from. But in the background, we still have alcohol-related deaths being almost 150,000, and tobacco-related deaths being 500,000. So that's important to keep in mind, particularly with crews and audiences beyond here, of what's going on. When you talk about access along the way. These are things that perhaps folks had over the weekend or access to. Now, the alcohol thing, I know it's like still 1 p.m. on a Sunday here. You got to wait. I know. The poor cashier is a giant eagle, right? The things we do with laws and all that, we'll touch on that later. But in the big picture, these things are legal with restrictions, and look at the numbers, of course. All right, if you are falling asleep already, we'll wake you up here, hopefully. Snap this from the internet: a family beer cave? Well, it's family market, and you play on the words and all that kind of stuff. So, boy, these are the times I wish you could really be there with an audience. But anyway, what the heck is family about that? Well, we're going to talk about family and alcohol. I might as well put the disclaimer out there that my family owns a vineyard in Italy. So there. I didn't have a disclosure sign. Or a slide. I don't think I need one either, actually. Oh yeah, if I click the button, it shows you the little finger. They got a really good marketing department out there too. It's the Marche region. I wish my story was that I was named after the Marche region of Italy too, but parents weren't even aware. So anyway, it's the back of the boot in the middle. Nobody ever knows where it is, so I usually explain it. Except for a birthday party for my oldest son went to like 2 weeks ago, and I said that to the guy's house, or the party was at the house, and he's like, my family vineyard is like a half an hour from there. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't have to explain where the market region was. But anyway, we'll get this off the screen. So it's all about access. Okay. If I want Girl Flea wine, I was told I would either need to be a distributor, which by the way is 2 forms, $50, and you need a tax ID if you want to become an alcohol distributor. or I could just go to wine.com and get it. If somebody's looking for tobacco, vapes, Delta 8, all the stuff, I mean, it's almost impossible to not notice the access in any town. Here's just a few from our town here in Morgantown. Took them from online. I didn't go driving around like Dr. Barry did, I think, a couple weeks ago for somebody taking pictures or whatever. I actually contemplated using some of his, but anyways, it's very interesting going through our Morgantown mall. It's not that lively these days, but it still has a vape shop. So substances, what about sugar and caffeine? I mean, it's water, I promise, but earlier I might have had some caffeine. Big picture, contributing to various medical conditions, disease states in our state and certainly beyond. We are human. We glorify substances. We talk about them. Some of these books I've mentioned in the past, but some are actually newer. As far as drug utilization or anything related to it being in the media, books are certainly one way. Sam Quinones, middle books are on the top. He's been in our state a couple times, of course. When he was writing, so he did Dreamland. I'm not going to insult anybody's intelligence. You all know about that. But the more recent one last year in October, November, it came out as The Least of Us. Certainly recommend folks reading that one. When he was writing that, he actually spoke at, I think he was a keynote speaker here in Morgantown for the Appalachian Addiction Institute, basically, longer name. And I remember chatting with him, and he told me how he just came from a jail down in Clarksburg and was getting the beat on the street, although technically not the street, on a lot of meth issues. And when he was bringing that up in the conference, everybody's like, no, we need to talk about opioids. And he's like, what are you talking about? Folks that are on the cutting edge, we all know now, of course, but getting those different perspectives ahead of time, even. Let's see, American Pain, that's actually a WVU guy. It's a little bit dated in the book now. It's about one of the biggest and first pill mills down in Florida. But he's actually a faculty member within our university now. Minimize here so I can see. High Achiever. Anybody, if you want to do a little hand fee, anybody read that one? I recommended that to my mother-in-law. And the reason I mention that is because she's also sweet little grandma. And you read that book and it's got a potty mouth. Okay. It's folks that have read it are like, you recommended that to your mother-in-law. What kind of relationship you got going on? Sheena, you raise your hand. All right. So somebody else has read this thing. You can confirm for me that it's like, whoa, you gotta be ready. Okay. It's the story of someone going through our jail system, basically. And it's, if you've never been or don't have experience, it's an in-your-face point of view, involving drug utilization and dealing and all kinds of stuff. Stories meshed into one, stories we've heard before. This other one to the right here, Unfit for Recovery. That's I know that gentleman very well. He's a well-known pharmacist, travels the country speaking about substance use disorder, a lot of naloxone issues, all that kind of stuff. And it's his journey. And oh man, it's an interesting one. As a pharmacist, he broke so many laws I couldn't even list them in this hour. It's and a person who's making one heck of a difference out there today too. So all right, so that's a couple of those. As far as TV streaming these days and movies and all that kind of stuff, mentioned American Pain earlier. That was on what was it? CNN. Yeah, it's on there as a movie documentary kind of thing. Boy, if you haven't watched that one, when you watch it and the ending they give you like the updates. And if you watch it, I'm going to warn you, you're going to be mad. Okay, and that's not an opinion. It's a 100% what I've heard from everyone. And I'm not going to tell you why, because you should watch it. Recovery Boys, the gentleman with the ball cap, I believe at least a couple of you have met him. That's Ryan. We had him here at WVU doing an amazing talk or two once for big panel discussions. Drugs Inc., you could watch that when I believe it's the Kentucky episode, they show you making meth and it's legal to show it on TV because they omit one step. The internet couldn't include that or anything. Dope Sick was the book, then was on Hulu. Breaking Bad, Anybody want to volunteer for saying that they haven't seen Breaking Bad? I mean, you won't look that bad, right? Um, the list goes on and on. I'll lay off the raising hand here now, but in your own head, who didn't hear about NyQuil chicken? And it depends on different crews here. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but okay, we got some hands going up. Okay, there was this sensationalization going on a year ago now. I looked up the reference to see what the date was on this the other day because it was bugging me. But anyways, there was this recent time frame when everybody was in society, less of healthcare, but in society was talking about NyQuil chicken. Like if every kid was making NyQuil chicken. Concept of NyQuil chicken is cooking chicken with NyQuil instead of olive oil, apparently. Also available at the Growthy Vineyard, by the way. The olive oil, not the chicken nor the NyQuil. But anyway, that it's interesting how sensationalized things can get. And whether true or not, or actually widespread or not, becomes kind of a concern along the way. And thank you for those saying here, check the chat of the like, hey, I actually haven't heard of that. It's okay. The fad is said to be over. It was very short-lived. It involved the concept of like teenagers and college students cooking. I'll just stop there. I mean, really? Like how many teenagers and college students cook anymore? Like how many adults cook for that matter? But anyways, I'll get off my box here. They would be cooking the chicken in NyQuil and then supposedly getting the effects and all that kind of stuff. It certainly happened, but the sensationalization involved TikTok and the information was everywhere. It was literally on the news. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if we could take the information that is in all of your heads and put that on the news, we could actually make a difference. Who else has been out there in the news? Well, you got Gronk, Facebook MD. I mean, anybody can get into Facebook MD, right? I mean, you log in, you got an MD, PharmD, JD, whatever you want for the internet. Kids were eating Tide Pods. I know that everybody has probably heard about that one, right? Wow. I mean, where do we even begin? I saw one last night actually where one of the newest challenges on TikTok was to go really fast on a boat. Like picture, here in Morgantown, we got Cheat Lake. Go really fast, and the waves are coming off the motor in the back, and you do a backflip into there, and somehow people, I don't understand it, but people are getting hurt, of course, doing so. But then because of that, others are doing it. Like I mean, good golly. But we're human. That this is human trends along the way. Again, things haven't changed. A lot of substances have been around for a long time. Here's like 3 or 4 of my favorites actually. Heroin being sold on the streets of Morgantown and everywhere in our country, just anywhere, everywhere, no laws. Then you got this one night cough syrup. There's other versions of it too, but you got a substance that has alcohol, cannabis, morphine, and chloroform. Talk about, look that drug interaction up, right? Chloranidine's pretty much right along the same lines. And perhaps one of the best, worst, terrible would be asthma cigarettes. Smoke these for your asthma. This stuff's real. I mean, I know you can make up anything these days, and AI is going to take over it all, but that we used to do that and leeches too, right? Another way to look at the various substances is proposed by this guy, Dr. Kevin McCauley. He developed this periodic table of intoxicants. If this is pleasing to your eye, you could also buy the t-shirt online. At least it used to be available. It's just the idea of organizing things where towards the left you have sedatives, towards the right you have stimulants. This isn't rocket science. The rows across are the classes of each, and then the little nuclear things on the bottom are anything that doesn't fit, like chocolate, sex, Facebook, gambling, all those things. One of the bigger ideas here, though, is that regardless of what it's doing, it's in the background increasing dopamine when something's better than anticipated. This list these days we need another little island of all the different things that are being made out there. It's always chasing what's the next thing? What's the next xylazine? Xylazine's here everywhere, but what's the next is a good question. So somehow in 2023, without annoying a lot of people or getting polarized, Going to get into regulation thoughts. Already kind of dabbled a little bit, but the opposite of any of that is the clinical side of things. So therapeutic index is, of course, the difference between what'll help you and hurt you. The wider the index, the wider the bar here, on the left, the more wiggle room, the better. And that's one way of looking at things. That doesn't talk about access and all of that. It's just saying there's more wiggle room in that dosage. There's still high doses available that can hurt people, but at least there's wiggle room there along the way. All right. Contrary basically to that, we have pretty much across the globe, but our country leads the force with it, but the controlled substance class is nothing necessarily new for everybody here. But one of the things I wanted to work on a mold here, making a bowl on that spinning thing, is there's the healthcare supply chain, and then there's the illicit supply chain. Completely different yet overlapping substances. And that's where we all in society get in hot water along the way. One pivotal one here, marijuana, cannabis, got that as a C1 currently. I only trusted it because I handed in these slides really soon. Will it be like that a month from now, 18 months from now? I don't know. Again, Mega Millions, go buy one. Most slides, I don't add that one in there. But things change, and is it really objective along the way? Well, let's look at a couple opioids. If we're going to be down with for this conversation, morphine milligram equivalents or MMEs, an attempt, feeble at best, an attempt at comparing potency of opioids. Many flaws, but an attempt. But heroin, which is illegal, has an MME factor, generally speaking, of 3. Let's pretend it's off even tenfold, and that would even be 30, but documented as 3. Fentanyl, however, is much more than that. That's a legal substance, and carfentanil is certainly legal. It's an MME factor of 10,000. So clearly, this is not what the DEA is looking at, and the rest of legislators, of course, for making our controlled substance laws, because it's that dissection of healthcare supply chain and illegal drug supply chain. Totally different things. Fentanyl is recommended to be in every hospital on this planet by the WHO. And good golly, where would we be without it for any surgery, right? But then there's the illegal supply chain. And really along the way, it's all about the dosage, baby. This old gent said, sola dosis facit venenum. Latin, of course. The dose makes the poison, bottom line. Too much chocolate, take a lot, right? Too much water can be bad, hyponatremia, right? But calling out the pharmacy card here for a moment. What's the pharmacology of any substance that makes it enticing to be abused or utilized, misused? There's differences in the words, but pick one for this conversation. Here's 4 of the big ones. High Cmax, the concentration being large within the body. Quick Tmax, that concentration I just mentioned, having it hit really quick. Receptor affinity, we talk about that most often with buprenorphine, but the magnetism to the receptor for whatever it's looking to go towards, opioid, serotonin, whatever. And then overall, the magnitude of dopamine release. Comparing the dopamine release of chocolate, sex, cocaine, it is boom, boom, boom. It's like a pyramid on one side. Big step there. And trying to understand that along the way. But those are really the 4 big pharmacological, kinetic, and dynamic ideas there for drug utilization. So you remember that simplified chart that I had there with drugs, counting drug-related deaths being a little bit over 100,000 now. Tobacco was 500, alcohol was almost 150,000. Here we see just use. There's this other dichotomy, I know you all know well, of those living with substance use disorder and those just having a wild weekend, use. This tries to get towards that a little bit, perhaps. There's overlap, of course, but the the difference between those pretty profound, of course, but it factors in for what the outcome is in the end of along the way. So I pretty sure that everybody has seen something like this recently, with the thing that jumps off the screen here is that there's still a lot of substances involved in overdose deaths, but the gray line is the one that stands out. I always love how these are from, I believe, NIH via CDC via everybody else. Synthetic opioids other than methadone, primarily fentanyl. Can they just type fentanyl? Like, I mean, there's actually 7-8 prescription synthetic opioids that like they're pharmacologically false in saying, oh, other than methadone, but then primarily just call it fentanyl for right now. So here, in addition to that, though, so I skipped over on purpose that all the other lines there were kind of just hogwashing together, plateauing or going on, along the same ways there. If you magnify into prescription opioids, the word out there these days is like, oh yeah, they're that's not really involved in things anymore. Well, there's two big components to that. One, the relevance of prescription opioids being related within overdose deaths has plateaued, as you can hopefully see here, for many years now. Even like about 15, not 20, but probably 15 years or so, it's plateaued. Doesn't mean it's gone away. It means it's plateaued. The caveat to that, though, is where do you get them? To say prescription opioid doesn't say that you got it from the healthcare supply chain. It may have been diverted from the healthcare supply chain or from the illicit market as well, too. Again, those two columns are very different, but the overlaps are where the stories get very convoluted. So conversely, we have heroin, of course, that spiked about a decade ago, but that's been going down recently because of that gray line 2 slides ago saying that it's all fentanyl. I think a couple weeks ago within one of these echoes, we said like, hey, is anybody actually seeing heroin, utilization / hopefully not overdose and all that? And the answer was yes, of course, but this still resonates perhaps. One of the other pivotal things here, and the DEA took this one up, the one pill can kill idea. I'll try and go over really succinctly where this is not sensationalized and what the idea is behind it, of course. But of course, there's stuff out there now that we just don't know what's in it, which doesn't mean it's bad. There might be nothing in it actually, but that's like having a fishbowl and saying, here, there's 500 M&Ms in here, but one of them actually is deadly. Would you put your hand in the fishbowl and eat one? There's humans that would. I mean, maybe you're starving or something, and there's humans that never would. We're all different along the way there, but the messaging to perhaps even younger folks of like, if you're making that decision to down a Tide Pod or jump off of a boat and it might hurt you, or one pill, those are all small decisions, small moments, huge consequences. So another way of looking at this, usually use the kid things a lot. In my experience, if you want to buy a random Hot Wheel, and I'm a little bit dated now because they're $1.25, you go into the store, whether we're talking, I'll say it properly, Walmart's or Target or whatever, they'll have like the big bucket, the big thing that it used to be DVDs that you'd stick your hand in and grab one. Now it's Hot Wheels for kids, or maybe they're hanging on the shelf individually too. But if you're getting a random one, it's like $1, it's $1.25 now. That would be like heroin, and go with me. But if you know the exact Hot Wheel or Matchbox, not trying to take sides here, car that you or your kid or whoever neighbor wants, then you go online and you're going to spend 15 or 16 bucks, whether it's Amazon or wherever. It costs more for the specificity, or at least the perception thereof. That's like the prescription opioid, because heroin for a long time was cheap, still is, fentanyl right in there as well too. Whereas the prescription opioids, that's where there was a lot of money in the market, the illegal drug supply chain even too. So trying to compare heroin and Hot Wheels, maybe I should call the slide that, I guess, but just bigger picture thinking about that. But how do we really describe this? Here's, red's a little tough on the eyes, my apologies, but here's an attempt. So healthcare supply chain. Here in Morgantown, we had Mylan. making gazillions of pills every day. And now that has pretty much ceased, but there's manufacturing plants across the globe where this is what's happening. You take the inactive stuff and you mix it with the active stuff, and you've engineered an amazing cauldron that makes it absolutely somehow perfect of a mixture. 50-50 of inactive and active, the black and the red here. Whereas in the illegal labs, you don't have the fancy cauldron. And they can afford it if they wanted it, but they're certainly not going to do that. That would be kind of silly. But here's where you get the gamble. And this is what's happening out there for, we typically say for our kiddos, but it's really for anybody. Now, when somebody's taking that one pill, which one of these did you get? You're in the matrix here all of a sudden, red pill, blue pill, whatever it is. You get the black one. Well, that's boring. You get the red one, you're dead. And you get the other two, maybe a good night, maybe a bad night. But that's a huge gamble. And that's not how it used to be on the illegal drug market side. It was closer to the last slide, or perhaps here, if we're looking at the mouse thingy, this top right and bottom left, these were probably okay. Again, Paracelsus dosage matters, but these two are not okay because it's either nothing or everything. And that's where we are today. So if you're a visual learner, there you go. If you're not, well, sorry for the last 60 seconds. In addition to that, it's that's oversimplified because that's active ingredient, inactive. What about intended active ingredient and unintended active ingredient? There's a lot of math out there now. Has been, of course. This is a pretty dramatic depiction here of huge spike in overdose deaths involving meth. We'll just say meth. They like the paragraph version. Nothing new to anybody here, but now having recently seen those other charts, boy, that's like the spike we saw with heroin back in the day. The other one, it's record on repeat, new substances. The healthcare supply chain, meth is legal. It's a C2 medication. Good luck finding it in a pharmacy. When I present to exclusively pharmacists, say you put 1,000 of us in the room, right? And I'm presenting them, there's always 2 or 3, it's guys for whatever reason, that are like, I have it in my pharmacy. And I said, look behind you. There's 997 other that definitely don't. So yes, it's legal, but it's not everywhere. That's the whole access, utilization, all that kind of stuff. Whereas, like I'm depicting here on the illicit supply chain, the cartels, the dealer, whatever, the whole conglomerate, lots of sensationalization out there, but boy, they know how to make money. They're very diversified. They're into many more things than drugs, but that's what makes the papers, even if electronic and all that kind of stuff. David was mentioning that not as many prescriptions available now. That certainly contributes to the that plateauing overall when we were talking about the prescription opioid side of things. Sorry, I didn't see that earlier, my bad. But as far as the illicit supply chain for meth, it's a movie in itself, but it wouldn't be a long one. Folks did shake and bake, they did all the other stuff. It's all organic chemistry that we could teach in any university. Good luck getting that one through curriculum committee, but and then we as in the world, primarily our country, cracked on that. We're like, nope, can't be doing that. So that was when they were using P2P back in the day. So then the street chemists were like, oh, that's fine. There's multiple ways of making meth, so we'll send our Smurfs out and have them buy up all the Sudafed. And then we cracked down on that, and the street chemists are like, boy, you really think you're getting us here. And that was this map here is where when you have the sniffles or congestion, I should say, or both, runny nose and congestion. How does that even exist? But it does. And it's like giving your right kidney or your firstborn to get a box of pseudoephedrine these days, with good intentions, but the street chemists are still laughing their way to the beach with billions of dollars, because now they utilize the precursor of P2P. Going old school, they were using P2P. They use the precursors now coming in from across the globe, and that's why it's just everywhere and so cheap these days. But again, that's what you're seeing on the screen. And what I was just yapping about there is the illicit supply chain. There was the healthcare supply chain, or still is, I should say. So what I always say is, for the Breaking Bad fans out there, if I ever have a conversation with this fake person, um, he would say to me, "You mean to tell me that pure meth is already made as a legal prescription medicine? You got to be kidding me." To which I would say, "Well, to my friend, the left-handed version is or was over the counter. In fact, my mom gave it to me when I had congestion as a child." His response, "Oh boy." All right. So one of the other ones that wanted to pull in here, jump into another substance here, getting off meth, complete 180. Benzos. So benzos are some of the novel psychoactive substances, NPSs, that are out there. And here I'm really not talking about prescription benzos. We're not going to bang the drum of opioid benzo. Oh my gosh. But as you can see, hopefully here, there's been a gradual climb in the incidence of illicit benzos, typically being out there. So here is some information, decent reference for you there too, of recent novel benzos that are out there in the street utilization. Again, the illegal drug supply chain. This is not our healthcare supply chain. So you can see trends on the right, and then just um, the actual individual ones on the left there. I'd encourage folks to look into it for more info, but just for sake of time and sanity here today for everybody, we'll leave it at that. But often left out of the conversation though, but they're out there. So how, yeah, we're doing it on time. All right. So any of this stuff, we what do we message to our communities? We had the one pill can kill thing earlier, then the poison center idea. We don't need to wait till March to get Mr. Yuck out and everybody wear green for St. Patty's and poison prevention month. 1-800 all twos with the one in the middle. 10-year-old can understand that. But will the parent? Is that number available in every house if, gosh forbid, something happens? Not everything is an issue, but knowing where to call, or apparently you can text now and go online and all that stuff too. But yeah, just having that available. Within pharmacy, this is one of the questions in our law exam. We're the only healthcare profession that has a national or a statewide a licensure law exam. It's preposterous. But at least one of the questions that's on there is 1-800 all twos with the one in the middle. Not everybody says it that way, but not everything's a problem though. There are always the stories from poison centers of the false alarms. So on the left here is one I swiped from somebody else where they had if you put Pez upside down, it kind of maybe looks like 23D. So, you got the mom, dad, uncle, whoever, babysitter that finds the pill in the kid's room. And oh my gosh, all of a sudden we're having them pee in a cup. And and it was a Pez. Here's a picture I literally took on my own because we had a relative who had a little tizzy, and like it's an M&M, and it got me thinking, what's the different ways you could see an M&M? You got 4 options. There they are. Yeah, God bless my wife when I'm taking pictures in the kitchen. But in the big picture, I often quote Norval Call, head of NIDA. I usually read it, but the bottom line is going back to that alcohol and tobacco idea, the numbers being staggering. It's all about access. Obviously, we have these conversations when it comes to cannabis, everything these days, but still vaping, tobacco, alcohol along the way too. The mixing of products, hopefully that visual earlier was helping out on just the simplistic understanding to explain to others on what is going on with the drug supply, the illegal one these days compared to decades past. It was always, a gamble for folks, but now it's a bigger gamble. Vegas wouldn't even take up the odds. It's interesting along the way there. So what's next? A thing I didn't cover here today was, of course, hydralazine, not an opioid. Naloxone's not going to work on that, but it's in the drug market these days. It has been. But what's next? Where there's always going to be something, if not some things, whether, the heroin, fentanyl, meth, xylazine, Tide Pod, NyQuil chicken, for crying out loud. And how do we address it? Talk about predicting the future here. the dynamic conversation these days is with cannabis, of course, of where will it land on this chart I saw somewhere. I thought this is pretty funky, actually. Like, what's our options? When it comes to looking at what we do as a country, globe for that matter, on regulating drug utilization compared to and involving awareness and education. Where do things land? There's a couple articles that were recent this past week. I think they started the media covering a little bit more of like, hey, what's happened over in Portugal since they said, everything's quote the media free for all, which is not the case. But and now they're starting to say, oh yeah, there's negative outcomes, and it's like, oh man, for like 20 years now we've heard nothing but good. When is the end point of any study, if it's a study? So lots of options there overall. Be remiss if I didn't provide some resources for y'all as far as different substances, whatever we want to call them. The top leftish here, the arrow wit, it's like some of our legit clinical pharmacology resources, but it's available online. It's not as legit, but it looks like, feels like going through some of the drug interaction checkers, things like that. Arrow wit there. Top right, you got drugs forum and blue light probably being the more famous one or known one as far as drug utilization blogs. It is absolutely amazing what street chemists and common anyone will put on there. It's not the Facebook of drug use, but there's intelligent stuff out there is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of it silliness, but there's embedded intelligence to really learn from as well too. So all right, that is that for the going over the trends, the big pictures, the poking the bear, the giving everybody some things to think about there. I made a QR code, so I figured I'd throw it on this slide. You can literally scan that thing. It takes you to my painguy.us webpage if you'd like to. But what really want your eyes on there is just the perceptions on the left. That is literally a pharmacy, and there is a sign that says, notice, this is a drug-free workplace. And I just want to leave you with that when thinking about the healthcare supply chain and the illegal drug supply chain, of the overlap, but the distinguishments between them, how we can not only help our patients, but help our communities as well too along the way, for that. So how do we do on time? Nailed it.
Perfect. Nailed it on time. Thank you so much, Mark, not only for your time, but sharing your expertise with the group. We always love your memes and gifts that you also include in your slide deck. So thanks for doing that. And I do have to say that notice in that last slide was very ironic, but I love it. Thank you. But yeah, anyone with questions, comments, everyone is welcome to chime in. You're welcome to unmute. If you prefer to chat in, I'm happy to read your responses, Dr. Baltiera.
Thanks, Mark. I always appreciate your humor. I would have laughed at you getting kicked out of the spelling bee, but so, another complicating event, I think, is legal manufacture of some of the medications we use. I have a patient who just over the weekend picked up a new prescription of buprenorphine naloxone. And because of her switch, losing her Medicaid, going to something else, got a generic. Actually, she calls it Dr. Reedy's. And there are some case reports of maybe different levels of it. And she went into withdrawal, switched her back to the brand name, and she's fine today. Again, there's always the possibility of, some psychological component, but I don't think so. She's been on it for a long time and has been on other generics off and on. So any thoughts on that? You want to test the samples we have and the lot numbers, or what? She's filing a complaint with the DEA, etc.
I got thoughts, but is perhaps even just observationally, has anyone else experienced that with their patients or heard of others as well? I believe the answer is going to be yes, but see some heads. Okay. I see some exactness in the chat, so folks are looking in there. So all right, so not hearing any other chiming in there. The difference branded generic, at least in our country, is supposed to be and is trusted. There are caveats here and there. One of the things that is often misrepresented is I've seen articles out there be like, oh, there could be a 20% difference, and then sometimes that matters. And that's statistically incorrect. So I'll go textbook first. It's about standard deviations, and I have yet to come up with an intelligent way of succinctly explaining it, particularly in these kinds of conversations for 20 seconds. It just takes longer. If I get there, I'll share it. But we can trust that. But there are the one-offs where it can matter. You know, a lot of times people say, oh, it's narrow therapeutic index drugs and all that. Yes, but one of the instances, we were just talking about this 2 days ago. My in-laws live next to me. They're pharmacists too. So we're pharmacists everywhere, for crying out loud. So these things come up in conversation. Levothyroxine, Synthroid. Is there a difference? So I'm jumping off buprenorphine right now to go to the other one. So with that, there are concrete observed differences for folks because the subtle, tiny little changes can matter. One of the things that I'm not going to say we, but healthcare professionals for decades said, you have to take your Synthroid, your levothyroxine on an empty stomach first thing in the morning. And I remember my first year of pharmacy school sitting there, not educated yet, but contrary to what my parents would say, with common sense saying, well, what if you did it wrong every day, but consistent? Well, like 15 years later, we finally came to the realization that like, you can do it wrong, but do it consistently. The reason I point that out is there's other instances out there of the, something's up. It's not contentious topics. Thyroid is not that riveting unless you're living it, of course. So that's an example there. Was there any changes along the way? I have heard from folks like you guys, a good number, no, not everyone, just confirmed that like, hey, we've noticed differences along the way there. If somebody's, you're looking at the differences in the dose there can a little bit matter. Well, buprenorphine doesn't really hit up as one of those narrow therapeutic index medications, but when you're thinking about a withdrawal component, the receptors are waiting, if there's a couple extra that are not occupied then because there's a slight deviation in the dose that's typically not even clinically relevant, but maybe can be, we're onto something there. I think I would be joined by many here to love to see a study, an article, at the very least, investigative reporting to get more granular on that. That's why, quite frankly, I always answer the first part of that question the same of like, what are you guys hearing? Because I'm just stingy. I want to hear more of like, making sure I'm not living under a rock here. So it is pharmacologically justified to have the chance for it. The tricky part would be, what if your hand's on a Bible and whatever and saying, well, can it happen is different than will you expect it to happen? Pharmacologically speaking, I wouldn't expect it to happen, but it can. And that seems to go congruent with the low percentage of the time where it is mattering for folks. So we as healthcare professionals, what do we actually do with all that gibberish we just went through? Know that it can happen, be ready for it, talk about it. What you do, and here's where I'd want to hear from others, particularly in the psych side, perhaps, of the, but then do you proactively tell someone so they're expecting it? And then like that's a can of worms right there too. I don't know if anybody wanted to chime in that realm of like, how do you go about that part?
Yeah, and interestingly on this patient, I think Mark is, she's somebody who, when we actually had to put her into the hospital to titrate up her Suboxone when she was using, she had precipitated withdrawal, and that's a whole other, whether that was it or not enough Suboxone, whichever way, too much or too little, all that. So she's potentially maybe more sensitive, maybe more psychologically sensitive, who knows? It's very complex. So I'm all in for generics. The other question is, it's the pill or modality of release, I'm sure, is not always exactly the same. And then quality control, in the world, it's not always, even in the, we've had, formula problems in the US where, in the last couple of years, formula was dangerous, and so yeah, so all those things are possible, but generally I don't tell people, warn them. I mean, they'll tell us, they'll call me for that. It's not going to kill them.
To me,
Yeah.
and like in this form, I'm more concerned with our reactions.
Right.
Something were to happen, I remember I had an allergy test once. If anybody's had it, on the back they do like a bingo card to see little allergen pokes to see what you're allergic to. And I'm was at least a mess. I had full card bingo. And when the clinician walked in and saw me on the gurney type thing laying there and like went, whoa. And I'm like, dude, like, let's pretend
That's not a
we've
good
been there
thing to say.
before.
Right. Yeah. And the practical problem with this patient is she had just picked up 30 days prescription. And then her insurance, how do you payment and who do you argue with? And CVS is telling them to call corporate. And so, that's the more, real world challenge.
Yes. There's so much real world
That's,
within this.
how does that patient?
Yeah.
Right.
And then how many people, the concept of cold transfer to warm transfer, like having to tell her story. I think you said her, right? Multiple times to be like, what did she do wrong? She went, picked up her medicine, and took her medicine.
Right.
Like what?
Right. And she kept trying to take it and it just got worse and worse, which kind of makes sense to me, because it's,
and it's
the longer dosing of Suboxone and stuff, 36 hours, etc. So.
Tricky ones. I appreciate everybody chiming in though, of like when you're observing anything too. So what else? Anything else? Man, you guys going easy on me.
Yeah, I think since nobody else will talk, I think Mark and I could just go talk ourselves, just have a beer. No, well, and probably I think I saw some of the other people on here can probably verify. We're likely to attribute a lot of things that are happening to a single drug, and I think many of our patients are not taking single drugs anymore. We're seeing, not that it was pure before, but it's fentanyl plus meth, fentanyl plus cocaine, fentanyl plus cocaine plus meth plus xylazine, fentanyl plus we don't even know what else is in it. The patients clearly don't know. And around here, it's just a capsule with, they call them a scramble cap. It's scrambled and it's capsuled, and you don't know. I mean, so I can usually guess there's fentanyl in it. And they're a stimulant. Those are the two that we're seeing a lot lately. And it's just trends in the marketplace that, we're just, and
it's gotten into the, they still occur a little bit. The farming parties, or Skittles parties, where everybody to walk in the door, you had to bring a bottle of medication and you pour it in there and everybody just grabs haphazardly. And it's like another one of those, like, oh my goodness, but like, again, happens. And then in that accord, you're going to get things all over the place. I mean, stimulant, sedative, water pill, and that's more like the supply chain now. That's what I was trying to bang through here today. Just we get one of the other things we talk about a lot is like DEA red flags or diversion things, all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's a topic again for the future, but of like just that dichotomy of what's going on out there, and then we get the kidney punches in healthcare when it's like this is just transcends into everything in society, if anything less healthcare, and it's so tough. So yeah, to all your points there. So
Mark, this is Tony DiGiacchio. I have a question about the illicit benzos. I've had a couple instances recently of patients being very open about a lapse with an illicit benzo, an unprescribed benzo. And they tested positive on the point of care test, on the, preliminary test that, but when we sent it out for confirmation with our typical panel that we send it out, which I can't remember, it's the Ativan, Xanax, Valium, and maybe a couple other things, temazepam. Nothing came back positive. Obviously, we're not testing for everything, but is there something that you're aware of in particular and the illicit benzo list that you were showing that we should be paying attention to?
You bring up a really good point there, because although the confirmatory send out testing is specific and holds up everywhere, are they actually looking for, like, what are they looking for? I mean, somebody had Drano in there. Are they, would it print out sodium hydroxide? Like, that's tough, because then when you have the cheaper cup point of care right there, you know what it's looking for or not. I don't know if there's a perfect answer there. I do know, though, that most of the companies, particularly bigger ones, doing all the testing things, they're always tracking the trends and trying to keep up to know. But that doesn't necessarily help in a completely novel situation. When they're running their HPLC or mass spec to narrow it down, or to pinpoint it, actually, they'll get that, but then like, you report every single chemical within it, and anything like that. So it's tough there. The slide that I had the benzos on, the illicit benzos on, I believe, if I did it right, the reference was from, actually, it's like an NPS site of some sort, novel psychoactive substances. They actually have updated reports all the time of what's out there. That's where I pull those charts from, just to see. So if anyone's ever dealing with a lab that doesn't come across as being up to date with all of that, you could provide that for them, help them. And certainly practices even on our own, knowing of that kind of stuff. Of recently, probably about 2 months ago, one of the I believe grant efforts in our state, we had a prediction in Morgantown that there was going to be an increase in overdoses, and the prediction was correct. And I don't want to downplay the algorithms, but I take my pharmacist hat off and I'm just dude from Morgantown. I look at it and I'm like, you look at the drug supply chain. I bet you there was overdoses in Ohio, because that's where it comes from. And then when I looked into it, bingo, 2 days earlier, there was and that's where the cars are going to go and deal with the supply. I'm convinced there's more in that algorithm along the way, but it was spot on, because it's not predicting the future. It's just knowing, sold them there. Now they're coming here. That's part of the choo-choo effect there. So that dovetailed significantly, sorry, but it all factors into one. So there's no real good answer for the OG question you had there of no one knows along the way. It always takes a little bit of time for everybody to catch up. We just don't want to end up in predicaments where it's like a year and a half later, and then folks are finally like, oh yeah, meth is a thing. Like, let's learn along the way. And when there's little snippets here and there, pick up on it. So that regard, I recently had, I think you also mentioned either David or Tony mentioned something about the access to medications and all that. I about a week or two ago, I put something on LinkedIn. I might have talked about it here even, I blew up my Facebook with all these ED medications, because I clicked on one of them and I realized that, like, if you want an ED medication, if you want weight loss medication, if you want all these other, not recreational, whatever the term is that I can't think of right now, medications, it's a click away, really cheap. Yet if you need that levothyroxine I mentioned earlier, my gosh, like, we'll even hold you hostage for a refill. I mean, what are we doing? The healthcare supply chain and the illegal drug supply chain can learn from each other. It's not illegal. It's what they're doing illegally that's illegal. So that's that. Because I believe we're out of time, so I want to respect everybody's time.
So thank you so much, Mark, for the presentation, also answering all those questions, and like I predicted, great facilitating the chat as well, monitoring. And thank you, Tony. Thank you, Dr. Baltiero, for your questions as well. If anyone else has any questions, comments after the fact, you can always email myself or Elizabeth. We'll make sure to have it addressed. The only announcement that I have is that the next session will be on July 24th. And we'll be having a guest presenter, Shauna White, joining us, and she'll be talking about legal services. So I hope to see you all there next time. Thank you again, Mark, for a wonderful session, and we'll see you all next time. Take care.